Hey, we are back with section 3.4, Restoration Ecology. I'm trying out a new setting on my microphone. Hopefully it's not terrible. Let me know if it's harder to hear. I just want to see what can give kind of less background noise and stuff because you can hear me sort of moving around and I personally find that annoying. Anyways, this is the last section of chapter 3, which is the end of ecology. Pretty exciting. We got through a whole unit in quarantine, which is awesome. Keep up with those key terms and let's go through the lesson. Excuse me. Stewardship and restoration. So this concept of environmental stewardship, which means taking responsibility for the welfare of the environment. The term stewardship comes up, you might have heard it in religion class as well, but to be a steward of something sort of just means that you're watching out for it, right? So environmental stewardship means watching out for the environment and taking responsibility for how to help it, right? And this is specifically like a human thing. Animals don't do this, right? And they don't really need to because animals will form balance or equilibrium with their environment, whereas humans don't do that, right? I always think of the scene in The Matrix, you know, that really great scene in the first Matrix movie. I feel like a lot of you haven't seen it. I always am surprised by the movies you guys have not seen. It's almost like you have better things to do with your time. Anyways, when Agent Smith is talking to Morpheus, he has this really great little monologue where he talks about humans not forming an equilibrium with their environment, and then he compares humans to a virus because viruses sort of do the same thing. They destroy the host, right? And in this case, he's talking about Earth. But yeah, so it's a good little thing. So it's a little ecology kind of connection there, which is fun if you watch that movie. Yep, which is good. Would recommend it. I think PG-13, check with your parents just in case. But very, very good movie, very interesting, a lot of fun. Okay, we look after biosphere. So we humans, for other human beings, future generations, and for other organisms that hold ecosystems together. Scientists learn more about the effects of historic human impact on these ecosystems. More attention is given to decreasing, or attempting to decrease, human impact on ecosystems and restoring those that have already been altered. And then this term, restoration ecology, is the renewal of degraded or destroyed ecosystems through active human intervention. So we're trying our best to make things better, right? The only problem with this is the difference is that it's like, okay, people need to eat. We got to grow food, so we got to sell food, or people need furniture, so we have to make furniture. These things are sort of like economic driven, right? It's like people need these, so let's just do them, right? So we do these as humans, as a collective human group. We do these things. But it's like we start getting to the point where, if we keep cutting down trees, it's not going to be good, but people still need their furniture, so what are we going to do? Or if we cut these trees down, if we keep making food, growing food like this, we'll have to get rid of, there's a balance point that we reach, whereas the stewardship and restoration ecology, the sole purpose is just fixing these problems, right? So you can think about it like we're not doing this stuff on purpose. We're not destroying the environment just to do that for fun, just because we're laughing maniacally because we're evil things. We do it for another reason. So basically, there's an economic reason, or there's like a human need. That's like the point. That's why we're cutting down these trees. But then there's a negative effect, right? So restoration ecology is looking at, okay, instead of having a negative effect, let's actively create a positive effect. But you notice that but if humans don't get anything out of it, then this is hard to convince people to do, right? Because it's an investment in money and resources, and then people sort of say, well, does it get me more shoes? Does it get me more food? You know what I mean? Like these are sort of valuable considerations to take in, but that's part of the barrier to some of these things. Let's talk about some restoration methods. The one we're going to talk about is called reforestation. So reforestation is regrowth of a forest through natural processes or planting of seeds or trees in an area where a forest was cut down, right? Regrowth takes many years, but through natural succession, which we talked about a little bit, that term succession, right, the gradual return of native species of plants and trees will be observed, right? So in picture A down here, forests were cut down to use land for agriculture, right? Red trees were planted to reforest the area. As the red pines grew, they created shade, which makes other species show up there. And then after many years, now the succession occurs and there's a return of native species, right? So we can see more biodiversity. So as time goes on, biodiversity increases as if we plant these trees. There's been a lot of talk, I think, about planting trees kind of before all this stuff went down. Like that was a big thing. Like there were people on like YouTube, or there was that dude on YouTube who was going to get all those trees or something planted because he wanted to be better than Elon Musk or something. So that's like a big drive, which is actually not a bad idea to plant trees, because if everyone took the time to do that, then we're all planting these trees, which is great, and we're trying to make sure that the ones that we cut down. The issue is that we can cut trees down faster than they can grow, right? So if we cut down a forest and if we replant another one, that's great, that's awesome, a step in the right direction, but we can't do anything with that forest because it takes a long time for the succession to occur and for the biodiversity to increase. So we have to basically just leave it untouched for a very long period of time. So it's there's a not drawback, but there's a challenge there, right? That yes, we can plant all these trees, but we have to make sure that we're not cutting down more trees than we're planting. And we also have to make sure that we can have time in between to take breaks, if that makes sense. But the time scale isn't really working in our favor because people are always going to need more stuff next year, whereas these forests are going to take like 20 years at least to start getting to a point where they're like an ecosystem again. Okay, let's do wetland restoration. So lots of government agencies run nonprofits in Canada that are working to restore wetlands by returning the wetland areas that were drained back to their natural state in terms of soil quality, composition, water coverage, plant life, habitat. Ministry of Natural Resources in Norfolk County, near us, has begun a wetland drainage restoration project. Because sometimes what you have to do is you have to drain wetlands for whatever reason. I think maybe if you're going to build a dam in a particular place, that could cause a wetland to drain. Like if it's on the other side of the dam or whatever, then these wetlands don't have any water getting to them, and then they dry out, and then they're gone, right? So then we're talking here about restoring those wetlands by, I'm not too sure how, but we have ways to get water back into them so that they can return to their original state. Controlling alien species. So the first two we talked about were difficult to do because they required lots of infrastructure, lots of things. Well, not that these don't, but controlling alien species is another way that we can help biodiversity by increasing, because we can control the alien species that we move around, right? As we mentioned, alien species, specifically invasive alien species, like we said, they can disrupt the balance of the ecosystem. Biocontrol and chemicals are two methods that ecologists use to help control alien species, right? And biocontrol means using a species to control the population of another undesirable species. So the European gypsy moth, the moths feed on tree leaves and are capable of removing all the leaves on a tree. To control it, a European fly called parasitoid was introduced as a form of biocontrol. This fly lays its eggs inside the gypsy moth caterpillar, eventually killing it, right? So, okay, the gypsy moth is around here. It's killing all our trees. How do we do that? Sometimes you can take another organism and introduce that organism, potentially also an alien species, into an area, and it can kill off the invasive species, and then itself maybe die off or become or get into a balance with the ecosystem. So these European flies, once you've introduced them, obviously you run the risk of what if these flies are invasive species. So you need to think this through. You can't just release a bunch of animals and just sort of hope for the best. You do studies and you plan and then effective with control, as well as a way to stop the the control from getting out of hand. So that's biocontrol. We're going to talk about chemicals. And the chemicals a bit more straightforward, because you just use chemicals to kill the animal, right? So Norway rats and black rats in Langara Island in BC. So lots of different birds, and it's predator free. 2 alien species of rat accidentally get there by ship. They eat the bird eggs, and then populations go down by a lot. And then so what do? You just you kill all the rats. You put poison in baits, and then the rats eat it, and then they die, right? And then we see that the bird species goes back up, right? But now what's the issue here? And we have a little answer. It says, what are some of the downfalls of using chemicals to control alien species? Well, the bioaccumulation. So if we're going to start just pumping all these chemicals into an ecosystem, what's going to happen? Well, yeah, if they're going to kill the rats, which I guess is a good thing, but then all these toxic chemicals are going to enter into the food chain, right? And we're going to see that they are going to then they get in the food chain, and then they start moving up and they bioaccumulate, and then we can see the issues resulting from bioaccumulation and stuff. Last restoration method we're going to talk about is bioremediation, which stands for just the use of living organisms to clean up contaminated areas naturally. Remediation just means to sort of fix something. Plants and fungi can be grown at toxic sites to revegetate landscape, but to also clean soils by collecting poisons in their tissues. Bacteria have been used to break down oil from oil spills that damage coastline ecosystems. Another interesting thing is that sunflowers do this. I watched that show Daybreak, which is pretty interesting. Ask your parents before you watch it. But they mentioned that sunflowers can do something with radioactive material in terms of I don't know if they anyways. But sunflowers can like withstand radioactivity, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, you have some bacteria that can break down oil spills. Now, that's not just a magic, oh, we don't have to worry about oil spills anymore, because it's not a very large amount of oil that bacteria can break down, but it's still helpful. And maybe you can put if you can plant something on a place where there's been a toxic spill to hopefully get rid of the toxins. But again, this is over time, right? Because these take a long time to do. They might not work on a human time scale, but they'll work on a natural one. So we have more. We have bioaugmentation, which is another restoration method, which is to use organisms to add essential nutrients to depleted soil. You can use clover to add more nitrogen to a soil, right? So bioremediation is like removing toxins from a soil, or you can do bioaugmentation is to add nutrients to a soil. And that's about it. Okay, great. I think we're done ecology for now, but keep an eye out for new videos, new postings and stuff, and we will talk soon.